we will talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats. They played Friday at the Heritage Bank Center against Louisville. I was really excited about that game. Louisville's one of the best teams in the country. They didn't necessarily play like that in the game Friday, which gave UC a lot of opportunity to go out there and make something happen, and they unfortunately let that go by the wayside there as well. So we'll talk about that. UC only scores 64 points in the game, 74-64. Louisville comes into the Heritage Bank Center and wins. As I was mentioning at the top of the show, a lot was made about it being at Heritage Bank, not at Fifth Third. Basically, everybody around the team, anyone that's a fan, is like, yeah, this is ridiculous. This should be at Fifth Third, and then play it at the Yum Center if you play Louisville beyond that. And, the ticket sales, that was, a big story. Obviously, you had Elder and St. X playing down the street at the same time. Hard to believe a high school football game would take some fans away from UC Louisville, but I think it probably did, to be honest with you. And I think there was like 8,500 in the Heritage Bank Center. Tough to see, where the crowd was, like who was, had more of a pool in there. I think there was obviously a lot of red with both teams having red, but kind of felt 50-50. Certainly when Louisville was going on their run there in the second half, place got really, really loud, which isn't ideal, obviously, for Cincinnati. But I think, based on the circumstances, it was fine. But it would have been a heck of a lot better, obviously, if it had been at Fifth Third, and it would have been a lot more of a raucous environment there in that game. But you had plenty of opportunities if you're the UC Bearcats, and that's kind of got to drive you crazy a little bit if you're a fan, or certainly Wes Miller there as well. I believe it was like 7 minutes into the game before Louisville scored a field goal, and this is a team that was averaging over 100 points throughout the beginning of the year to this point, and that's their thing, is they're in a offensively, they're a great team. They're going to shoot it. They're going to run the floor. They're going to play fast. And that wasn't working for them at all. And Scott Springer was joking about the rims when he came on the show last week. And that was kind of what I was thinking when I was sitting there watching that game as well. He wasn't lying here. These shots aren't falling in for the Louisville Cardinals. But they eventually got going in the second half. Conwell was tremendous. He ended with 25. And it was kind of like out of nowhere, too, whereas he was fine in the first half. And then, boom, just came on in the second half, turned up. And same with Mikel, the point guard, right? He's a great player. Watching him in the first half, I didn't realize he's so small, or skinny, I should say. But, I mean, his dunk in transition was whoa, because you see him as kind of this point guard guy that's kind of a sniper, and he's got range and he's got good vision or whatever, and then he goes on the breakaway and just jumps out of the gym and slams it home. You're like, oh goodness, this guy is going to be a highly drafted guy, certainly as a freshman. I talked about the bigs in this game, and that was an advantage that Cincinnati had, and that was one that they needed to capitalize on this game, and they did that. I was impressed with Moustapha Thiam. I thought, he was going to have to be really good for them to have an opportunity to win this game. He was really good for them, especially in the first half. He was a presence there on the boards. Cincinnati was out rebounding Louisville in the first half. That's why they had such a big lead. He had like 3 blocks in the game there as well. If you would have told me that Thiam would have played like that, I'd say, oh, you got a really good chance ultimately to win this game. But it kind of turned into a situation where Louisville wanted Shon Abaev to beat them, and they basically welcomed him to try to do that. And Shon hit a few big shots in the first half that kind of helped them build that lead and helped them kind of hold that lead for a little bit there as well, but then ultimately he just went cold. He went cold, and they were daring him to shoot, and he was shooting, and it wasn't going in. And, look, he's going to be fine. Wes said this after the game. Watching him in person, I was like, okay, yeah, I understand why he was, such a highly touted recruit, right? And I expect him to be fine. Is he going to be one of the best players in the country? I'm not going to get carried away and say that. But, I floated out the idea of him potentially coming off the bench. That doesn't need to happen, right? Shon Abaev will be fine, but he just wasn't shooting the ball well. They were daring him to shoot it. He was shooting it. He was shooting it fine the first half. But after that, it wasn't good enough. And just, he's a freshman, too. And that's the biggest game he's played in his whole life, going against a team like Louisville, coached by Pat Kelsey, that has an opportunity, obviously, to win a national title. And, I don't think the moment necessarily looked too big for him, but, there were some shots there that he was open and he didn't hit. And, look, if you're going to go in and beat Louisville, right, if you're going to beat one of the best teams in the country, you got to go shoot the rock. And that goes for anybody. If you want to upset a team in college basketball, a team that's a lot better than you got to shoot the rock. And Cincinnati didn't shoot the rock well enough in this game ultimately to win. Bob Miller. Pat Kelsey talked about this after the game. West, of course, is like, we're not going to make excuses, right? But you didn't have Bob for the last 8-9 minutes in the game, and it was slipping away from you a little bit, and you still were trailing. But that's your best player, And that was the first time I saw them in person. They've got some guys that, could potentially be your best player, but Baba Miller's your best player, right? And he had the hip injury and wasn't able to go back in the game. And the game really changed there at that point when you lost Baba, and that put you really in a tough spot. Hopefully he can come back soon. UC, by the way, plays tonight against New Jersey Institute of Technology, I believe is what they're called. So you would think that's going to be a win for the Cincinnati Bearcats. But, that was kind of a game where, you needed Baba there at the end, and unfortunately he wasn't able to be out there and be on the floor for you. And that certainly hurt. Sincere Harris, watching him in person. That guy is so fast, so quick, and plays with so much juice. At times he's just out of control, and he jumps up, and he's so high in the air, and you're like, oh, my God, he's going to hurt himself. But he brings a lot of juice. He's your perfect guy to come off the bench and just be a crazy man. So I was impressed with him. He's got to shoot it, obviously, a little bit better for Cincinnati. But, you just need Shon Abaev. When you get a guy like that, you need him to be one of your best players. And I think he will for Cincinnati. I have confidence that he will, but he had an opportunity to really shine in this game, and he wasn't able to do that. So that, to me, is what held you back a little bit. Again, you scored 64 points against Louisville. Now, you only ended up losing by 10, but if you went in there the night before the game today, West, you're going to score 64 points in this game, he's probably like, oh, God, we're going to lose by 30 plus, right? That obviously didn't happen, but if you only score 64 against Louisville, not going to be good enough. So the offense went cold. Baba went down. Wasn't ideal. Really impressed with Moustapha Thiam. And then, we talked about Day-Day's role changing for this team. It's awesome that Day-Day Thomas is back, right? Now, obviously, he's been here for a while. Hasn't necessarily contributed to a lot of winning, but he's had some good moments, some really good moments as a Cincinnati Bearcat. And when he leaves, people need to talk about Day-Day Thomas. That's a good Bearcat right there in Day-Day Thomas. But the whole idea this year is that his role was going to be a little bit different. He was the leading scorer on the team last year, but now it's like, oh, you got Baba Miller, and you got this guy, Shon Abaev, a freshman, right? And you bring in these other guys there as well, and you got this productivity off the bench, and you got some shooting now, supposedly. His role would look a little bit different, but they need him to score a bunch of points. And I don't know. He can do it, but can he score a bunch of points on a team that makes the tournament? I don't know. Can he be your leading scorer on a tournament team? I don't know. I would like to see his role change a little bit more, but if Baba's going to be out for several weeks, they're going to need Day-Day to score. And, it might look a lot similar to last year where it's like, well, who's going to take the shot? Well, we need Day-Day to take the shot. And I don't know if we can have that be the case on a team that makes the tournament. Again, Day-Day's been tremendous as a Bearcat, made of all the right stuff, great teammate, hustles, right? Again, you see that when you're there in a game. It's hard to necessarily always pick up on that on TV, but when you see these guys going after loose balls live in person, it's like, oh, this guy wants it, right? And West kind of talked about that after the game. There was kind of a few loose balls there, especially in the second half, that they didn't get to. But I'm a little bit worried if they're going to ask that much of Day-Day from a scoring perspective, then it kind of feels like you're stuck in kind of a similar spot you were in last year, as opposed to really taking that step forward in the right direction, obviously, if you're the Cincinnati Bearcats. But, Pat Kelsey, I don't know what we said in half, but it worked. Again, they didn't look like you could say they looked like an unranked team in the first half. Like, obviously, the talent was very obvious for Louisville, but they were not executing at all in the first half. Kelsey said he went in there at half, got after him, and you saw that, right? Because the UC Bigs were really dominating that game, and then Louisville kind of had an advantage there on the block and on the glass in the second half, and that obviously propelled them a little bit there as well. Mikel obviously got going a little bit. That was very quiet, 22 points. I was like, this guy, he's gotten a lot of hype, and he hasn't really done much. Then you look up, and he's got 22, and he's got a steal, and he's jumping out of the gym, dunking. So, they just slowly kind of got going. Same with Conwell there as well. It's like, oh, wow, he's just got 25. Like, where did that come from? So, we're going to see. Obviously, they've got some weaker opponents here. I don't think you should be hitting the panic button necessarily if you're a UC fan. We're all waiting as far as the Baba Miller injury goes, because if he's going to be out for some time, that's going to be a serious issue, because I do think, especially watching that game in person, that he is their best player, and they're going to need him to be their best player as well. But really intrigued with what you saw from Moustapha Abaev. He's a freshman, didn't shoot it well. He'll be okay, I think. Sincere, obviously, off the bench. They keep putting Tillery in the game. I get he's a highly touted guy, but he's not ready to play right now. Tillery is absolutely not ready to play right now, and seemingly every time they put him in, something bad happens. He makes a bad pass. He makes a bad decision. he has a lapse on defense. So I don't know if I was talking with a buddy about this, and he was joking like, yeah, he puts him in there because he doesn't want him to hit the portal next year. And maybe there is something to that, but he's not ready to go right now. And, every time he was on the floor on Friday, something bad happened. So I would probably try to stay away from that. I get at this point of the year, it's November 24th. You're trying to figure out your depth. You're trying to figure out your rotations. It takes time. It's happening all across the country. I understand that. But he doesn't look like a guy that's ready to play right now. And that's okay. A lot of freshmen aren't. But, I would probably hesitate on putting him out there in the lineup a little bit more. But ultimately, you got to shoot it better if you're the UC Bearcats, especially if you're playing Louisville. You understand that. And, you started out dominating the glass. That didn't exactly continue, but at the same time, I'm intrigued, certainly, with what you saw from Moustapha Thiam. Not hitting the panic button. It's a really good team. You lost by 10. I think the reason why it stings so bad is because you could have easily won the game, right? If Louisville goes in there and beats you 100-85, you're like, well, yeah, it stinks we lost, but it's like, well, that's Louisville. They score a bunch of points, and, we still scored 85 points, and we feel solid about where we're at. I think the reason why this stings is you go, man, we held them to 74 points, and they didn't score a field goal for the first 7 minutes, and we still lost. But, you lose the game by 10. If you would have told people that going in, they'd say, yeah, there's a reason why the spread was around 9 or 10. So, be interesting to see how they bounce back tonight. Again, it should be a no-brainer, easy win for them tonight, but we'll see. And, I don't think you came in with high expectations this year for Cincinnati basketball, and I don't think they've given you reason to really be super excited, but I still think there's reason to believe that they're going to make this tournament and still be a force in the Big 12, but certainly looking forward to watching them over the course of the next few weeks.